Good morning. I'd like to call the meeting of the California Collaborative for Educational Excellence to order and ask that you all join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Please stand. Salute. Pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Welcome everyone who's here. I know that this session is not quite as compelling as the one that's going on in Washington, D.C., but I do appreciate your interest in our work and being here. I just want to take a few minutes to do some general announcements before we get into the actual agenda, so bear with me, please. Just to remind board members that letters from the public on matters before the board are always aggregated if we receive any, and they're contained in your electronic folder. I don't believe we received any correspondence, Erica, so you won't have that. But just as a reminder to the general public, if you're interested in communicating with the board prior to a meeting, please be sure to email it to our CCEE website so that we can have that prior to the meeting. I also want to remind the audience that sign-up cards are available on the table outside of the boardroom. Members of the public who wish to speak on any item should complete a sign-up card and place it in the inbox where the little yellow sign is with the arrow. Public comment will be limited to 2 minutes per speaker. There is a timer on the podium that we will follow. And also, just as a reminder, item 15 is an item for general public comment. So if you wish to speak on items that are not on our agenda, please do so under item 15. If anybody wishes to submit materials for us to look at the meeting, please provide 15 copies to our staff, Erica Berrigan, with the item number, and please do not give information directly to board members. Just a reminder to all speakers, members of the audience and staff, please introduce yourselves and identify who you represent prior to speaking. And just a friendly reminder to board members to be sure to turn on your microphones when you're speaking and off when you are not speaking. Our meetings are all live streamed, so people who are watching remotely can only hear us if we speak into the microphones. I think that's it, except I would like to, just in terms of order of the agenda, if it's all right, and I'm looking for Josh to make sure I've got these numbers right, that we move item 14 up to occur prior to after item 12. Before item 12, sorry. So following item 11, we will take up item 14, if that's all right with folks. We just thought it made more sense with the flow of the discussion. Okay, seeing no objection, we will do that. And I will move to item 1, approval of the minutes. I have a motion from Member Sabrante. Second, Member Watkins. Any public comment? Any questions from the members of the board? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposition? That motion passes unanimously. Item 2, Executive Director's Progress Report. Dr. Cohn.
Thanks, Sue. It's been a very busy 2 months. Here's some of the highlights. We had a retreat with CCEE in the desert. The CCEE staff and elected leadership were present for an overnight discussion. We focus on how we can better collaborate, given the important roles that we both play in ensuring the successful implementation of LCFF LCAP. The most important aspect of these kinds of meetings is the opportunity to listen carefully to the needs and concerns of those that we're partnering with and to pursue common ground as we move forward. I attended the Urban Education Dialogue on May 18-19 down in La Jolla. It's an opportunity to check in on the concerns of the large urban districts in our state. In addition to discussions about the core districts, the May revise, the status of the SSA and the future of LCFF, we had an incredibly valuable after-action discussion with San Bernardino City Unified Superintendent Dale Marsden about the tragic events that unfolded at North Park Elementary School on April 10th of this year. It was a sobering reminder that student and staff safety must remain a top priority as we work to improve schools and districts. And I can't say enough about the job that San Bernardino City Unified has done in developing materials that will be helpful to all districts statewide in the area of school safety. Also attended the PACE Advisory Board meeting on May 4 and 5. Very ambitious agenda. We discussed in depth the latest 3-year report from the Local Control Funding Formula Research Collaborative, the Core PACE Research Partnership, and Susanna Loeb of Stanford's bold new effort to produce Getting Down to Facts 2, which will be published in the 2018 gubernatorial campaign. You'll recall that in 2007, Getting Down to Facts was first published. It was revisited in 2012, and now she's putting together a wonderful team of researchers that will update where we are as a state on both governance and finance. I was also moderated a panel at this year's American Educational Research Association conference in San Antonio. The title was Telling Perspectives on the Struggles and Hopes for Public Education. It was organized by the incoming AERA President, Deborah Ball of the University of Michigan, included scholars from UC Berkeley, Penn, and the University of Newcastle in Australia. The overall theme of the discussion was how should researchers and practitioners approach their work in the Trump era of division and polarization. And whenever I'm at a national meeting, I'm just amazed at how much the country is looking to California for leadership on the important issues of the day. Finally, I spoke to the California Association of African American Superintendents and Administrators on Saturday, May 5, statewide organization that's focused on the rescue of all underserved students in our state. And while preparing for that, I found out that our own board member Watkins received the 2017 John Peshkoff Memorial Award for his commitment to juvenile court, community, and alternative schools throughout his career. So congratulations, Michael. A lot of our agenda today will focus on the transfer of fiscal agents, and I just want to personally thank Jeff Brashears, Glenn Price, Paul Jessup, Anna Farfan, Teresa Hayden, and Mary Jane Burke and her outstanding team for bringing this to fruition on a very short timeline. So congratulations to all. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Carl. Any questions, comments, Tim?
Thank you for the report and great diversity of activities and things you're involved with. So continue to appreciate the outreach. Any just takeaways for us as a board? Any highlights from any of the different groups in terms of our work or our partnership or engagement?
Sure. Yeah, I think people in the rest of the country see California's effort to create a new state agency that isn't bound by all of the compliance responsibilities that most state departments of education just have as a part of what they have to do. And so I think people are recognizing that perhaps a version of the CCEE is needed in other states. And part of the beauty of what we do is that there's nobody telling us you've got all these federal and state compliance responsibilities that you have to pay attention to all the time. And so it's a degree of freedom that we have to actually go where the action is in terms of the field. I like to talk about, while I have tremendous respect for all of the large urbans, having spent 4 decades in that, I find the rest of the state of California just fascinating in terms of getting out there to places that aren't covered by the media on a daily basis. The other thing that we do whenever we are in these places and there's a prison nearby, we go and visit the prison. It's the most sobering reminder of the work that we do and how important it is to get that right. Because when you walk into those prisons, and we were at Soledad 10 days or so ago, you see what happens if we don't get this right. And I've actually been lowballing the figure on what it costs to house an inmate per year. The LA Times reported this week that it's actually $75,000, which is the equivalent of a Harvard education with room and board, is what the California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation is paying for a lot of young people and older people who make bad choices. And so the work that we do, spending on the front end, becomes even more important.
Other questions, comments? I just, again, want to express my appreciation, Carl. Appreciate both the thorough update and your leadership. I think, you have really set us up to be on the national stage, and we're very appreciative of that. Thanks so much. Our next item, item 2, is, item 3. I'm going to call up our legal counsel, Jim Baca, approval of the draft amended conflict of interest code for the CCEE. You just want the red light on. It should be on.
Hear me? Yeah, all right. I'm going to be up here for a while, so if you get tired of me, feel free to take a nap. So we'll start with item 3. Item 3 is approval of the draft amendment of the conflict of interest. As you recall, we had a long discussion with FPPC regarding our conflict of interest policy that occurred in last year. On what the FPPC requires is that every other year the conflict of interest code must be renewed, and if there are any amendments, the board should vote on those amendments. When we originally drafted the conflict of interest policy, we had one employee at the time, Dr. Cohn, and since then we have obviously grown. So there are amendments to the conflict of interest policy that include a few things. First, it includes the directors as designated positions with respect to the conflict of interest code. And secondly, just add some amendments that comports to what the purpose of the CCEE is. So the recommendation is that we approve the amendments to the conflict of interest code. We have been in discussion with the FPPC. The FPPC has preliminarily reviewed and approved the amendments. So I ask for a motion at this time.
Okay, yeah. Before we have a motion, any questions or comments? And just a refresher for people who don't follow this stuff super closely, this is a requirement for financial reporting, the so-called Form 700s that have to be filed annually so that public is aware of any potential conflict of interest.
Yes, that is part of the requirement, is Form 700 compliance.
Okay. If there are no questions, I'll take a motion to approve.
I'll make a motion to improve the conflict of interest code, the amendments.
Thank you, Michael. Is there a second? Second. Moved and seconded. Is there any public comment on this item? Seeing none, I'd ask for a vote. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. No opposition. That passes unanimously. Thank you, Jim. Now we're on to item 4.
We're going to be a series of resolutions regarding the transition of the fiscal agent from RCOE to Marin County Office of Education. First, at item number 4 is a recognition and support of Marin County as the new fiscal agent. As you know, pursuant to Education Code 52074, it is the state superintendent of public instruction with the approval of the State Board of Education. It is their responsibility to contract with an LEA, a local educational agency, to serve as the CCEE's fiscal agent. The reason that CCEE needs a fiscal agent is because it cannot be the employer of record. An LEA must be the employer of record. Although it is the state superintendent and the State Board of Education who does contract with the fiscal agent, it is the CCEE board that provides direction to the fiscal agent. The statute itself does not require the CCEE board to approve the selection of the fiscal agent, but Dr. Cohn and the staff, and I think Chair Burr, also believed that it was important that the board take official action to at least support and recognize the selection of Marin County as the fiscal agent. A resolution is not necessary, but it's our recommendation that the board officially approve, recognize, and support Marin County as the fiscal agent.
Okay. So thank you. I appreciate that description, Jim. I'll ask for a motion, and then after action on the motion, I would like to actually formally recognize Marin County and ask Superintendent Burke to come up and introduce her team. So I would like to entertain a motion. Thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second.
A second. Is there any public comment on this action? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. No opposition, so that's approved unanimously. Sure, go ahead, Michael.
I know at one point in time, we talked about the indirects. Do we know what the indirects are for this particular fiscal agent?
We do.
Maybe Jeff can speak to that.
Yeah, Carl can answer the question.
It's 5% as established by Jeff Bell at the Department of Finance.
Thank you.
Okay. Mary Jane Burke, would you like to come up so we can formally express our appreciation, and we'd love to meet your team.
Appropriate for me to say a few comments, if it would. Okay, got it? Great. So first, I want you to know that we feel quite honored to have the opportunity at this particular point in time to be part of the next steps that the CCE will be taking on behalf of the kids in the state. So I want you to know that our team is thrilled. And I do want to particularly call out Riverside County Office of Education as I framed to the members of their team that we do fully understand that they were the organization that provided all the startup hard work during these last several years. And we understand that we are standing on their shoulders as we move forward. And so on behalf of Marin County Office and the kids of the state, I think we all owe a great deal to Riverside. And of course, as I say those comments, I don't want Riverside to step away too quickly. Got that, Paul? Okay, so just know that it is amazing what they've been able to do over this period of time. So that's number one. It has also been quite an eye-opening opportunity and privilege to work directly during this process with members of your team, Tom, with Glenn and Jeff, and Carl with you and your team. It has been great to sort of begin to understand fully the import of the work, but more importantly, the direction that the organization will be going in collaboration with all others that care so deeply about kids in the state, including our county superintendent. So I want to let you know all that. We are definitely a work in progress. As you know, the state board made the decision on approximately May 10th. So we're in, full swing. We have made a commitment to this board, to Carl and team directly, to be nimble, flexible, responsive, and service-oriented. So I want you to know that is our intent, with a full-on focus that this work is focused on kids. And so we intend to meet that expectation as this all evolves. So as we were thinking about what would be the best way to provide service, we looked carefully at what would a good team be from the perspective of the County Office of Education to do that. So I am happy to introduce the team to you. First, Tarina Mares, who's standing behind me, is the Deputy County Superintendent, will be providing point services as it relates to the embedding of CCEE's work within our organization in an appropriate way. Brooks Allen, who many of you already know, is also here. We have decided that one of the ways we'll be using that indirect rate will be to provide a point person at the Marin County office that will help support all of the work for CCEE and beyond. And so Brooks Allen will be the #1 point person. We would anticipate in the future, if appropriate, if there was someone sitting here, that would be Brooks Allen sitting here on behalf of the Marin County Office of Education and on behalf of the work of the state. In addition, as we were thinking about some of the challenges, we took a look at where would be the best place to try to make sure we provided an infrastructure that was robust, that could work statewide, related to access to technology, the internet. And we immediately went to our partners at FCMAT, who have a model very similar, right? They have essentially team members all over the state on any given day. So Mike Fine is also here, the new CEO of FCMAT, and FCMAT has agreed to provide that component of the overall structure on behalf of CCEE. And then also Bob Henry's here with us. He is the legal counsel that I have used throughout my career as the county superintendent and has provided support. I refer to this team as the A-team, meaning that these are people who are experts in their field and in the content, but more importantly, understand that our good work is for one reason, on behalf of students. So on behalf of the team and the Marin County Office of Education, we are very honored and privileged to have the opportunity to be a small part of the next level of work that will be going on here at CCEE. So we thank you very much for having this opportunity.
Thank you, Mary Jane. And any comments or questions? And thank you. Welcome to all of my friends in the back.
Let's hear it for the A-team.
Yeah. As long as they don't get any big gold chains that they're going to wear on their neck. Or,
You just never know. You just never know.
No.
Right? Thank you.
Look forward to working with you. Thank you.
And I just want to echo what Mary Jane said as well, and Carl earlier, about Riverside. Paul, I would love if you would stand up, and Anna, and I know we're going to see Teresa later, but just to acknowledge the work that Riverside County did in getting us, thank you so much. And really appreciate your continued work, I know, on this transition to do a smooth handoff to Marin County. So thank you again very much. Okay, Jim, now we have a lot of resolutions, as I recall. Now we're moving on to item 5. This is delegation of authority of initial hiring and contracting.
Yes, And I do concur, RCOE has been a fantastic partner in working with me and the board in accomplishing its mission. And if you do get those gold chains, maybe you want to pass one on to me. So I wouldn't mind. Item number 5 provides limited delegation authority of initial hiring and contracting. This item really provides the same direction to the fiscal agent with limited delegation that was provided to the executive director as granted by the board in December of 2016. A new delegation is necessary because we do have a new fiscal agent. The old resolution specified RCSS as the fiscal agent. This resolution will allow the executive director to direct the fiscal agent to enter into contracts with individuals or organizations up to a maximum of $100,000, which is the same delegation that occurred in December of 2016. The contracts that are authorized under the delegation are explicitly subject to subsequent ratification of the board, and it will provide some efficiency, we think, and has provided efficiency in the authorization of contracts for services. So this resolution refers to the fiscal agent generally, and therefore will be able to withstand any future fiscal agent transitions, although we hope Marin is here for a very long time. So there is a resolution that follows, and we would recommend that the board adopt the resolution.
Any questions or comments about the proposed action? Seeing none, I would accept a motion to adopt resolution number 17002 relative to entering into, oops, I got the wrong one, sorry.
001.
I'm jumping ahead here.
Already getting tired of me, huh?
Yeah, no. Is there a motion to adopt the resolution? Okay. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Moved and seconded. Any public comment? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. No opposition. That passes unanimously. Okay, Michael has a
So the
question.
$100,000, that's just for contracts or subcontracting, not employees, is that correct?
It could include employees for less than $100,000. So it wouldn't include any of the directors, and there is a separate resolution that we're bringing before you on the directors, the current employees.
Okay,
Again, it is subject to ratification. So should a contract be entered into by the executive director that the board subsequently determines is not something that the board prefers, the contract itself will have language that indicates that it is subject to direction of the CCEE board.
and as you said, just to reiterate, it is the same resolution we were operating under with Riverside County. Okay, thank you. Item 6. Now we're on to the giving direction to Marin County to enter into a contract with Dr. Cohn.
Yes, this item will allow the board to maintain the executive director in his position through the original contract expiration date of August 31st, 2018. It does direct the fiscal agent, Marin County, to enter into a contract of employment with the executive director on essentially the same terms as his contract with RCSS. This resolution is a one-time directive, does not delegate any ongoing authority to the fiscal agent. And we recommend that the board adopt resolution 17002.
Okay, any questions or comments on the proposal? We have a motion. Is there a second? Second. Moved and seconded. Any public comment on item 6? Okay, seeing none, we have a motion in front of us. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. No opposition. That passes unanimously. Item 7.
Item 7 provides direction to the fiscal agent to enter into contracts of employment with current CCEE staff members. This item allows the board to maintain all staff members in their current positions, notwithstanding the fiscal agent transition, and directs Marin County to enter into contracts with current staff members on the same essential terms as the contract of employment with RCSS. The resolution is proposed again for efficiency's sake to streamline the fiscal agent transition process, since we will not have a meeting prior to July 1st. Again, this resolution is a one-time directive and does not delegate any ongoing authority to the fiscal agent.
Do I have a motion, or first of all, any questions or comments? Okay, is there a motion to adopt the resolution?
So moved.
Moved, is there a second? Moved and seconded. Is there any public comment on item 7? Seeing none, all those in favor of the motion, please say aye. Aye. No opposition, that passes unanimously.
And I will point out that the staff of the CCEE is fantastic and very good to work with, so thank you very much. Item number 8, direction to the fiscal agent to enter into CCEE contracts that are non-personnel contracts. There is a log of, I believe, 3 contracts that are non-personnel contracts. And again, this streamlines the direction to the fiscal agent and the transition process. The executive director has determined that these contracts will need to be renewed as of July 1st, 2017, and must be executed by Marin County. So this resolution, again, is a one-time directive, does not delegate any ongoing authority to the fiscal agent.
Are there any questions or comment? Tim?
What are our non-personnel related contracts?
In the log, Josh, you may want to speak to that. I know there are 3 contracts that you have now. I think they're primarily facility contracts. So,
Yes, so what they are, they're facility contracts that run from beginning of the year to end of the year, as opposed to the rest of our contracts, which end in June, on June 30th, and start again July 1st. So these would allow us to continue the contract. Most of them end in November. They're facilities. All other contracts for Josh or the PLN or whatever we do will start as of July 1st.
So when you say facilities, you mean where you physically operate? at?
Correct.
With
So
those
our lease with
Alameda County? Got
RCOE
it.
and,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay.
right, there are 3 leases in the log, one with LA County, one with Riverside County, and then there is an auditing contract with Ravernick, Trine, and Day. Those contracts will expire at the after the new fiscal agent becomes effective. So it's necessary for the board to.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I just wanted to get clarity on what non-personnel contracts are, so that sounds good. Move the item.
Okay, thank you. I have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Moved and seconded. Is there any public comment on item 8? Seeing none, all those in favor of the resolution, please say aye.
Aye.
No opposition. That motion has passed. Item 9.
I appreciate your time.
Aren't you still with us? For item 9? Renewal of agreement of legal counsel contract. This should be the one you're most
Yeah, I tried to
interested
hide.
in, Jim.
I tried to hide away from. It might be a bit self-serving, so I'll let Carl bring that to you.
This is renewal on the same terms as we've had existing and required by the change in fiscal agent moving to Marin.
Okay, and just to understand, so we would renew our agreement for legal counsel to continue to serve through the 17-18 year, right?
That's correct.
Okay. Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any questions? Any public comment? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. No opposition, that motion carries. And I think that completes the transition work from Riverside County to Marin. I also failed to express our appreciation to Superintendent Torlakson and Glenn Price and Jeff Brashears I know it's a little bit of an unusual activity and took a lot of cooperation and collaboration on everybody's part, so I really appreciate that. I do think going forward, there may be some consideration, since the original statute, there was no CCEE board, so that's why it gave some authority to the superintendent and the state board, that going forward, and we certainly hope we don't find ourselves in this position, Mary Jane, but if we were to make a transition to another fiscal agent, that would be done by the CCEE board. There's some consideration of making that change. So just so folks know that. And thank you to all of the attorneys that made this happen. We're moving on to item 10. We're actually now going to get into the policy work. And Josh is going to come up and give us an update on the professional development implementation plan. Josh, are you planning to be here until tomorrow, or?
Printed it on thick paper just to scare you. No, we actually have a timer. Ish and I are going to be efficient in our presentation. Can you see up front? Okay. Good morning, board, Madam Chair. Thank you as always for hearing this update. We are beginning our transition from the 16-17 year, under which the original PD plan was developed, into what changes might occur for 17-18 and potentially for 18-19. I'm going to bring up colleagues at various points to talk about various parts of this, but I'd like to just start by giving an overview. This is the agenda for today. As occurred back in October when the board began consideration of the original plan, there are two primary things I would ask the board to consider. One, for each part, the board's comfort level with scope, focus, audience, cost, timing, and then if there's anything else that you feel like the update is missing. And terminology-wise, we'll probably refer to this most often as an update or the plan update to distinguish it from the original plan that was approved back in October. You know the background, $20 million one-time funds. This is just for those folks watching who do not have the background. These slides will be available online shortly. A little bit of background on the fact that it was approved in October and the Department of Finance approved the original plan shortly thereafter. So in terms of what the proposed 17-18 plan update will do, it will maintain the focus of our PD activities on how to improve use of the dashboard and the LCAP as tools for continuous improvement. The proposal would shrink the number of components from 4 to 3. It would expand opportunities and deepen opportunities for partnerships with County Office of Education, statewide associations, advocacy and equity organizations, and other nonprofits. It does include some new activities, and it would make some budget adjustments. A couple of summary slides before I turn it over to Ish to jump into component 1. We wanted to sort of summarize and demonstrate that we are trying to model continuous improvement. And so this slide simply says for each of our original component activities, the purposes will all stay the same. But for the activities, as you can see, we've tried to demonstrate and walk the walk. So component 1 activities are being proposed as being transformed, component 2 activities are being narrowed, component 3 activities are being enlarged, and component 4 activities are sort of taken out as a component. So really making some meaningful changes based upon the feedback and experience we've had from year 1. We're not trying to be static, we're trying to make changes that improve our work. Similarly, collaboration and action. These are all of the sort of entity types that we are partnering with for each of the proposed components in the update. So as you can see, there are a wide range of partners and a wide range of partner roles for each of those components. And I don't want to get into it yet because that will come further in the presentation, but I wanted to sort of highlight those key ideas that we are modeling continuous improvement and collaboration in exactly what it is that we're doing. Slides 11 and 12 are sort of summary slides, but I wanted to have, you could see them up front in case you wanted to refer back to them as we go through, but it sort of summarizes each of aspects of each of the components. So before I turn it over to Ish, any questions on that quick overview before we get more detailed?
Any questions, comments at this point? I think we'll dive right in. Thanks, Josh.
Great, thank you.
Madam Chair, honorable members of the board, Ish Rayaru, Assistant Director, Training and Outreach for the CCEE. Pleasure to be with you as always. We're going to dive right into component one. And just as Josh mentioned, our purpose is remaining the same, although we've got some changes to the activities. So we're continuing to look at establishing a common baseline for using the dashboard and the LCAP as tools for continuous improvement. Originally, what that meant for us was having these two large-scale workshops. We had the one in fall 2016, and then more recently in spring 2017. And this updated plan transitions from these large-scale workshops to what we're calling single-topic modules. So what's a module? So from our way of thinking about it, a module is a professional development opportunity that's going to be focused on some LCFF-related topic of interest. The format might vary. There might be in-person sessions, there might be live streams, there might be some combination thereof. But again, it would be focused on some sort of a topic of interest that's meaningful and important to the field. For each of the modules, there would be an overview of the topic that would be intended to meet the needs of our very broad audience. And there would be topic content and activities that would be designed for a specific audience. So what might that look like? Here's an example of what we think it could look like. We know that there's going to be interest in knowing about the changes and the updates on the dashboard and the LCAP template. So that would be the topic. We would then identify a way to provide information about that topic to all audiences. And in this example, we would suggest a live stream presentation. So it could be in person for those that want to come to an in-person event, but it would also simultaneously be live streamed so everybody who wants the information can see it online, and then we would, of course, be able to archive it and post it to our website. In addition to that format for all audiences, we would identify a specific audience, and in this case, we think that there's a need for parents and families to benefit from additional insights around the dashboard and the LCAP template, and we would look to provide additional training for that audience. And we would see ourselves partnering with local educational agencies and community-based organizations in that pursuit to collectively develop content and then to ultimately co-present that content at some sort of an in-person training that would address those needs of the parents and the families and again, engage with LEAs. So why are we proposing this change? It's a shift. It's definitely not exactly what we were doing before. Like Josh said, we wanted to take the lessons learned and make adjustments as we go along. When we reviewed the survey feedback from both fall and spring, we continued to hear that there was an interest in more topic-specific content. And we've seen that there seems to be less interest, stronger interest in online content so that people can access it from where they are. The need for large-scale workshops is diminished as people have gotten up to speed initially and or are able to access that introductory comment through our website or through material that's been provided by other agencies. And we see these modules as building on the strengths from what worked so well back in the spring. So we had those breakout sessions, we really heard positive feedback, and we think that if we can continue to build out on that idea of something that's topic focused that people can go to because it's really of interest to them, that we'll be able to touch many more, have an impact on many more people around topics that really matter. So we, in addition to doing internal reflection and review of the survey results from the workshops themselves, we actually sent follow-up surveys after the last round of workshops. And I wanted to thank all of you for the questions you asked at our last meeting. One of them was around kind of why is it that some people who registered didn't come? And we wanted to get a sense for what people wanted in the future. So we sent one survey to registrants who did attend, and we sent another survey to registrants who did not attend. Without going into all of the details, we just want to offer 2 quick points. For those that registered for a spring 2017 workshop and did not attend, 71% indicated the reason they did not attend was because of a scheduling conflict. So we're trying to take into account the fact that people are busy, that they might not always be able to get there. And when we asked that same group about what their preferred means were for learning about LCFF in the future, You can see there that 58% selected some online option. There are still 14% that are interested in a conference, but it's certainly not the overwhelming majority. And you can see there that shorter in-person meetings have come up too. So we want to be responsive to both duration, how long are these sessions, and a format that will work for people. We see our next steps in this idea of moving forward with modules being to identify 3 to 5 topics. I've given you one example around these LCAP and dashboard updates. Other topics would likely touch on dashboard or the LCAP in some way, but we would want to make sure to identify topics that were of the greatest interest to the field, much like we did for the breakout sessions for spring. We would then develop and present the content for all audiences, and then for each topic identify a specific audience, and then work with our partners to develop content and move forward with co-presenting. Josh mentioned partners earlier in his presentation, and you can see we've listed COEs, school districts, charter schools, associations, and others. Many of the partners that we worked with on what we thought was a successful effort in spring. We want to continue to build on that model and work with those folks to develop content and, again, to help us co-facilitate the modules themselves. As a result of this shift, there is a change in the budget commitment. Previously, you remember that this number was larger, so we're proposing for the budget summary here that 17-18 would come to $163,197, and the same for 18-19. And the reason for the change in number is obviously that there are going to be efficiencies built in with this model. We think we can still make contact with many people, but not have to have, for example, as many in-person venues, which is what we would need for these large workshops that we've had before. So with that, I'll stop and check in to see if the board's comfortable with the focus, scope, audience, cost, what I've outlined here for component 1.
Questions, Tim?
Not so much a question, it's more of a comment that I definitely support the direction of staff. Based on my own experience, when you go to the workshop, people are there for so many different reasons, and they come in with so many different levels of expertise. So it's hard when you cast that wide a net with one big conference or workshop, but by really kind of focusing, and my experience was in the spring that those breakout sessions were really when you had 8 options, but you went to the one that you were most interested in, you could dive so much deeper in terms of, and you had people kind of with similar interests, similar expertise levels on that topic. So I really strongly support this direction that we're headed. The other thing I would just suggest is for some people, and I think it speaks to the whole scheduling conflict, the biggest challenge is time so often in people's schedules, and things come up last minute that are unforeseen. So having that online content is really important. But also I think some of those shorter opportunities of engagement in the field, even if it's a 90-minute session, somewhere in the field, looking for some of those opportunities where it might be hard for people to get away for a half day or get away for a whole day. But, for a 90-minute, 2-hour meeting, briefing, workshop, whatever you want to call it, I think you can really, that concise information, people are more likely to potentially be able to break away from whatever they're doing for that than to be able to give a half day or a full day. And again, that's also content that can go online as well. But, no, I really like this direction.
Thank you so much.
Other questions or comments? So just a couple things from me, Ish. First, just the charts are interesting to me about how to learn about LCFF, and I kind of wonder whether that is an indication of our broader societal issue with attention span. That we get everything now in these like bite-sized pieces of information, like all these updates we get about the news all the time. Yeah, exactly. Should we? Yeah, let's not even go there. I'm not going to Twitter. So anyway, that's just my sort of facetious comment. But so a couple things. I completely agree with Tim, and I think we've had conversations about this as well, that this seems like a logical move for us to be a lot more tailored, personalized in the kind of training we're providing. The two things I worry a little bit about is just if I've got my numbers right, is we're under this plan over the 2 years, we would be devoting about $326,000 to this particular component, where in our original plan, the 2-year investment was $2.3 million. So that's a real reduction in the resources and the commitment made to what sort of was the centerpiece, at least initially, of what we were doing. So I want to think about that a little bit more. And I think between this meeting and the next meeting, flesh out a little bit what the modules would be, how you're going to get the reach, how many people would really be, would benefit from this. So that's my number one thing. The second thing is, one of the things that I thought was very helpful in the second round when you were doing both the big sessions and the breakout was this notion of teaming, right? Have the board members, have the administrators, have the teachers, have the parents come together and kind of learn together. So again, I worry a little bit in this news change that you lose that a bit. And I would hope that we'd find ways for that not to happen or to continue to encourage that. So those are kind of my worries. Again, I'm supportive of the notion. I think it's the right way to go. I just want to make sure we're making sufficient investment in this area and that we have a good handle on, what our impact's going to be. And I'll just say kind of my general comment, and I had a conversation with Josh about this, is as I look at the proposed update across the components, what it seems like to me is we're moving from a place where we, meaning the CCEE, we're really both with partners, but developing the content and delivering the content and accountable for the effects of that. The new plan seems to decentralize a lot of that and move us away from that, which might be the way to go, but we're ultimately going to be held accountable for what the effect is and whether we made a difference in student learning. So I really want us to think about that probably more in the next component, but I just wanted to kind of make those overarching comments.
So I appreciate all three, and just very quickly, happy to talk more about numbers, like you said, next time. We've done some looking at that internally, certainly making sure that we're still able to impact large numbers of people, and I think this idea of teaming has come up as well, so we'll be prepared to address that next time.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, we're ready to component 2.
All right, I'll pass it back over to Josh.
Hello again, Josh Daniels, Director of Training and Outreach. So with component 2, the focus, as I mentioned earlier, has narrowed from specifically to focusing on the LCFF content library. The purpose has fundamentally stayed the same. This component is all about aligning the local trainings that are provided in the field across a wide variety of local trainers. We've reshaped a little bit how we talk about the content library, alluded to this in the past, but right now we're talking about a trainer's collection within the library. So that implies that there may be other collections of resources that exist in the future. What that looks like, we're not exploring yet. Right now, we're simply focused on the trainer's collection. So that means that the resources we have would not be open to the public for anyone to use just to go online. It would be that you'd have to go through some sort of orientation or process as a local trainer to access the resource. And again, this is voluntary. Only those who wanted to access it, would obviously, of course, be accessing it. We now have an online submission form. We've been soliciting and receiving content for our library. In terms of the process that we are going to be using, we propose to use for going from a submission of some content of a file to posting that file in the library is this 6-step process, and I'll walk you through it very briefly. As you may recall, we had a fall meeting where we did a version of this, but it wasn't fully fleshed out. We had a meeting last month where we did flesh it out much better, and the feedback we got from those respondents was incredibly positive. So of the 33 participants who attended, 31 responded, and all but one said that this basically was a good approach to take. So we're very pleased to have that feedback and feel more confident now about what type of review process we will use. Fundamentally, this is inspired by the sort of academic journal review process, although there are some different components to it. So stage 1 would be the submission. Stage 2 would be a review by a review team, and I'll define that in a minute. That review team would make a recommendation to the CCEE. So we would sort of start with that recommendation, do our own quick review. The 3 basic outcomes would be accept as is, accept with modifications, and then not accept. So if there were modifications sort of requested or required, that would be stage 4. The submitter can obviously choose whether or not they want to make those changes, but the modifications would basically say if you, the way we've been talking about it is that there would be required changes and suggested changes. Required changes would be those that are sort of factual or otherwise inaccurate. Those would be needed to include the file in the library. The suggested changes would be sort of our advice to the submitter, but the submitter wouldn't be required to make those changes in order for the file to be accepted. And then whatever final outcome there is, and then the last stage would be that the file is in the library. In terms of these review teams, the basic idea, and we sort of piloted this a little bit in our most recent meeting back in May, would be that you'd have a diverse selection of individuals, some from county offices, some from associations, some from advocacy and equity groups, some from community-based organizations, bringing different perspectives and expertise to the table so that when you are reviewing a file, it is not a single perspective, but multiple perspectives that reflect the field itself. So we would like to initiate an application process to the field, to people interested in serving as review team leads or review team members. And then we'd select those people. There'd be a stipend associated with those positions. We would then bring them together for these sort of calibrating content review meetings that would, again, this is what we modeled back in May, that would allow each of these review teams to calibrate their review processes so that while they might come at it with their own distinct approach, they'd understand the key pieces that they'd want to look at. Other details around this, we intend to identify and launch an online platform come the fall. We still would need to identify the sort of the user agreement that local trainers would need to understand and agree to in order to access resources in the trainers collection of the library. And then we also think that there may be some places where, for whatever reason, the library does not have content in a particular area. And so we've also set aside some funding, and we may involve the review teams in that process as well, but to sort of create content for those missing areas. We're sort of identifying our partners for each of these components. This is the folks who attended the meeting back in May. We would imagine they would, not necessarily individually, but as sort of entity types, that they would continue. So these partners could be submitters, review team leads, and review team members. The budget for component 2, a little bit more than $375,000 for each year, and that would primarily focus on the cost of those content review meetings and the stipends, and would be somewhat flexible depending upon the number of review teams that we felt we needed to identify and create. So with that, I'll open it up for questions.
Michael.
Why are you restricting it to those individuals who have gone through the trainings? Why can't anyone access the content library?
So the hope would be that we're designing these resources for those people who are actually developing, who are doing the trainings, and we wanted to make sure that that there was some understanding about how to properly use the resources. If we posted a PowerPoint presentation as a PowerPoint presentation file online, then anyone could modify it and use it as they see fit, could make content changes to it, and we would have no, there would be zero communication between us and the person who's doing that. The exact user agreement and those details still need to be sort of flushed out, but I would say that we, at the staff level, would want some sort of understanding between us and whoever was using the content so that we can have some understanding that it would be used in an appropriate way. And I think the vast majority of the trainers will likely do that, but there may be some who don't. And so that would be the concern. And that's why the sort of user agreement and restriction is something that we're recommending.
Okay, I'm not sure I buy your recommendation because they're already the ones knowledgeable, if I'm not mistaken. They know that content. So it'd be the individuals who, like a principal or a superintendent who wouldn't be part of that, let's say, training, that would need the access to it, in my opinion. But that's just, again,
I would, and this again may not suffice. I guess I would offer that we have a wide range of trainers who provide information to superintendents and principals and parents. And I think what we've seen, at least this is speaking for me, is that some of the content that's been provided from those trainers is could use greater alignment. And that's not to say that there are inaccuracies, but that when you have so I mean, as we think about all of these different partners on the slide who are out there presenting on one aspect or another around LCFF, it is important that when a principal or superintendent or parent hear information about LCFF, that it is as not uniform, but as consistent as possible. And whether that's coming from their county office or an association or a community-based organization, each of those three entities can have their opinions and perspectives, but when it comes to certain core factual aspects of LCFF, it's important that we articulate what is sort of an opinion of a trainer and what is basically a factual aspect of LCFF. And that distinction, among others, is one that I think having some user agreement will help move the field towards greater alignment. Again, that's a recommendation, but obviously it's up to the board to make the final.
User agreement or training?
So initially, we had framed this as a training for the trainers. Since the user agreement is still in flux, we don't know what that would entail. Certainly, I feel there would need to be some, at a bare minimum, orientation around how to use the library and what our expectations are of how this material will be used. At the end of the day, though, I would say that if the user agreement includes requirements or expectations that a trainer does not want to follow, there's no requirement that they access this content. Many entities use their own content. And so we wouldn't, I would say that if there is a person out there who doesn't like any aspect of the user agreement, then they would be free not to access it. It's not required. It's not. There are other resources that they can access. But I think that if we are going to be putting, in some sense, our stamp on or our name associated with some aspect of that training, I would want us to be very comfortable that it is aligned with what we believe to be accurate and up-to-date information.
Excuse me. Excuse me. I'm still concerned about access and transparency. I mean, so that you haven't assuaged me on that particular piece. The other piece, that's $750,000 there, and we don't even know the efficacy of this content library. Is that a lot of money spending on something that we're not sure if it'll be valuable?
Well, I certainly think that the purpose is very valuable. I think that one of the concerns that we have heard from a variety of actors in this space is one of alignment. I do think that based upon the initial sort of outreach and conversation we had prior to the original plan, that we arrived at this idea of a content library based in large part on feedback from the field. And we went back and forth in a number of different sort of ways in which we would do this. There was a trainer of trainers model that we considered. There was a couple others that I can't recall at this time, but we ended up on the content library in part because of the optional and voluntary nature and the fact that you already have, as you pointed out, experts in the field who are doing content. And there has been a lot of interest in and many existing opportunities to share that content, and this would expand that approach and allow, as just one example, so allow some of the lessons learned from one area of the state, one county office, one association, to benefit many, many others in a coherent, organized way, as opposed to just meeting someone at a conference or having a personal contact. That if you were someone who wanted to do a training for, say, your parents, You would, go through whatever the orientation is, you would understand the user agreement, and then you could access current up-to-date content that you could be confident in, and then provide that training to your parents, rather than sort of having to develop it ad hoc on your own. And we do think that the amount of money to create that is reasonable, given that there isn't a similar body of resources like that currently in existence for the field statewide, and that it would really be an opportunity to engage with a variety of entities across the state, that the cost is appropriately balanced to what we're doing.
Timelines. What are your timelines for this content library? So I didn't see any timelines or any benchmarks along the way.
So the online platform will launch in the fall. We have approximately a little bit fewer than 300 files, depending upon, some of them have to be combined. So we would hope to launch, and I should say files submitted. So we'd hope to launch the platform is intended to launch in the fall, with some subsection of that having been vetted, modified in some cases, and approved. And then that would also go along with the user agreement. So our timeline is for the fall, and barring some significant change in the dashboard or something else, we feel pretty confident that we can hit that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Tim.
My questions were literally going to be what Michael's were about the accessing of the materials. And I feel pretty strongly that if we're going to err, I want to err strongly on the side of access, for the field. So I understand, the staff perspective, but I think the barrier should be very minimal. That's at least my perspective. Maybe the user agreement should be just maybe a statement of principles about what this what the content's for, and then you click, an understanding. But I think the most important thing, because there's a great deal of care that's going into preparing the library, creating it with engagement in the field, which is fantastic. So the idea is to try to get that information as accessible to as many players as we can in the field, and to lower the barriers of entry. At least that's kind of the principle that I would look at. So, I would go more towards the side of open source, with maybe just the user agreement being a few clicks, understanding about what the principles behind how the information is going to be used. In the end of the day, I understand, it's our name, so we need to be, careful about how this is used. But at the same time, we want to get the information out there. So if the information is vetted with a lot of different partners, and if, you have a good faith understanding of hopefully how this is going to be used, we have to, I think, have that good faith, in the field that the information is going to be used properly. But I think we want to get the information out there. I believe in the content library. I think it's really a strong component, of what we're trying to do. To help support all these different trainings from all these different partners. But I think the closer we can go towards open source, the better.
Tom, did you have any questions? Okay. So maybe I have a little bit of a different perspective. I sort of reflect back on the rationale for CCEE getting the $20 million in the first place. And the concern was that when we first rolled out LCAP way back when, we just kind of dumped it out there in field and said, okay, figure it out, guys, and do what you're supposed to do, with mixed results, understandably. So the legislature came along and said, hey, we need to do a better job when we do the evaluation rubrics, what are now known as the dashboard. And we as a state have an obligation to make sure everybody's kind of on the same page, and that we're calibrating the information that's going out there. That's the undergirding principle for what we're doing here. So I understand the tension here, that we want to have, we want to have very high quality materials. We want to invite people who have materials to submit them. But we also want some assurance, because we're going to be accountable, that what we do through all of these different components in professional development is of high quality and, in fact, does improve student learning. So I think that's the tension we feel here. I understand it, both in wanting to make it all available out there, which is one opportunity. I guess that's one option for us to say, we developed a lot of really good materials. We're confident that they're accurate and all that, and then we're going to let a lot of people go out and deliver it and hope for the best. But if that leaves us vulnerable, in my view, to not being really fully accountable for what our impact was with these resources. So that's the struggle to me here, and this is what Josh and I talked about, that I worry a little bit that we've created this fantastic, high-quality way in which to submit materials, but then we don't know the answer to the so what. Who used it, how did they use it, and what effect did it have at the local level? That part to me, we're kind of not addressing here. So it's, I think we have different points of view, but are struggling a little bit with this. I'll just get to the punchline here, which is, I'm not in a position to approve this at this meeting. I think this needs to be kind of a two-step process for Josh and Ish and their whole team to go back and think about the kind of feedback we're giving, and then have a final approval. They also need to talk to finance and a bunch of other people before we actually approve it. But I think you kind of hear what people's concerns are about how we move forward with this. The other piece I just want to add, just also on the resources, if I look at the numbers, the total is about $755,000 over 2 years, but originally we planned to spend twice as much, $1.4 million. So again, these two big pieces of professional development, the first part that we're talking about modules, this is component 2, we're shifting a lot of money out of that, what were sort of our flagship efforts into professional learning networks, which I think might be the best thing to do. But just so we're aware of that, we started out going really heavy resource-wise on these first two components. We're moving away from that. But my specific question is, what happened to the county office leads? Because we had them in here, now they're not in there. Given the county superintendent's role, especially their unique role in their relationships with the LEAs in their particular counties, I know we thought it was important for them to also be calibrating their training and making sure they got a broad reach. So I was surprised, or at least I read it as if they don't have that role going forward, and I'd like to hear a little bit about that.
Sure. So in the original plan, there definitely was intentionally so, a large-scale investment with Regional Lead County Office of Education in year 1 that was designed to support aligned trainings on the dashboard for all LEAs across the state, and we're finishing up that activity now. The original plan then called for a diminishment of the cost of that relationship from years 1 to years 2 and 3, thinking that first year would require sort of a large push, and then years 2 and 3 would be less intensive. The original as we recognize the value of focusing on the library, the initial desire was to have regional leads sort of shift into the role of review team leads. And conversations with CCEE about that didn't seem to be sort of the right relationship to move forward with respect to that. So county offices sort of performing that role. Maybe the right is the wrong one, but there didn't seem to be strong desire for that formal relationship to shift from what it was in year 1 to review team leads in years 2 and 3. So that was what led us to then open up the review team lead to more of an open process, an application process of sorts. I think that we are, in many areas, including this area, we continue to partner directly with county offices and on the modules, or certainly the PLNs and this. It does represent in this particular area a step back from that particular county office relationship. And I think that if, again, based upon conversations we have from now till August, we're very interested in sort of revisiting that and seeing how else we might structure that so that it works for all parties involved.
Well, I'll just say for me, I think that we do, and maybe this is not just a conversation with the CCEE staff, but also with the county superintendents, that because they have such a specific role and they touch every single district in the state, going back again to the original intent of making sure that we have calibrated training, everybody's on the same page, that I think we have to see some kind of a specific role or hear from the counties about what they're doing on their own. I hope they're doing it in partnership. That's always been our expectation. But it just reading this on its face to say they're not involved anymore is troubling to me.
If I may, Madam Chair, I had one question around the sort of transparency, public nature. So I wanted to offer an example to sort of tease out some challenges that we have and perhaps get some guidance prior to the August meeting. So imagine that there was a PowerPoint presentation submitted, and it was fantastic, and it was aligned, and it was great. one option, there's a couple ways to put that into the library. One is as a PowerPoint presentation, a PowerPoint file that anyone can modify and use without really any our control. The other would be as a PDF file that would prevent them from modifying it, but would still give them access to the content. So one thing to consider would be, would it be appropriate to provide the PDF file for everyone to access, but the underlying PowerPoint file restricted? Same thing for, say, a Word document or another document that can be modified. Now, it wouldn't prevent anyone from doing a screenshot or copying and pasting, but it would mean that the information, the content there is publicly accessible, but the ability to sort of use it as a local trainer might would be more restricted. I'm curious, Member Sobranti, if that might be one thing to consider in sort of balancing the need to provide information publicly, but also recognize the sort of our commitment to ensuring that we know the impact we have on the field.
Well, I didn't verbalize that aspect of my thinking, but that actually was going through my mind, is maybe there's a two-step way to do this, where you have, as much of the information as you can get out there that is accessible, but then you might have some others that could be, I don't want to say manipulated by the trainers, but maybe they can, because they could, use it in the way with the proper oversight, with the proper kind of accountability of metrics that we have internally, for our trainers and how it's used, but that some aspect of the information is available to the broader public, maybe to principals or others that, want to do things that are even more hyper localized. And I think a PDF, that might be the way to do that. So that way there's still information out there. It's much harder though to change. And it's almost kind of intuitive that if you're going to use this document, you use it, here it is, as a PDF, as opposed to the others, which, trained trainers with CCEE oversight and accountability would be able to work with. So that might be one way.
I too could support that one, but I do believe that because we only meet bi-monthly, transparency is really critical. And I think if we put something behind closed doors, the public can't access it. They're going to wonder. So I think that may be a solution for all of us. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
So moving on, anything else, Madam Chair?
Yeah, I just wanted to do a time check because I think we're going to need to take a break here shortly. Would you prefer to go all the way through this or take like 10 minutes now and do the last two components?
10 minutes now is
Okay, so we'll take a recess for 10 minutes and return at 10:30. Thank you.
Well, good luck with that.
Okay, we're going to reconvene. We're still on item 10 and we're moving to component 3. Josh.
The red light? Okay, we're good. Thank you, Madam Chair. Again, Josh Daniels, CCEE, Director of Training and Outreach. So moving on to component 3, the networks. As you might see from your agenda, there is a separate item on this that contains more detail. So I'm just going to briefly go over it. And that item, which is an action item, we'll sort of talk about in more detail, sort of the hosts and data around those networks. But just to briefly cover this piece of it. So as all these components are, the purpose is the same. I just need to start my timer again. Excuse me. Okay, there we go. These are two sets of networks modeled after professional learning communities. The primary level is the professional learning networks, or PLNs. And then again, the facilitators of those networks themselves participate in what we call PLXs, or professional learning exchanges. Just as a refresher on the sort of structure, this is a little graphic we put together. You have your PLN with the participants, you have your facilitator, you then have other PLNs, and those facilitators are joined into a PLX with a coach. So that's the structure that we presented to you before, and that we're continuing to use. We're very excited, actually, that we received almost 70 letters of interest to host PLNs. We figured that we might get 50, maybe 60, maybe we could get to 60, but to get close to 70 demonstrates, I think, the interest in this. Based upon the initial estimate of budgets from those letters of interest and the available funding that we believe we had, we approved 52 of the PLNs that were proposed through the letters of interest. We identified up to 5 more that we are interested in funding if additional funding becomes available, primarily by getting additional clarity on our actuals from this year, or if the cost of those 52 were to come down based upon conversations we have with them as we clarify their budget. With 52 PLNs, many of whom would be having more than one facilitator, we believe that that is going to require 6, dividing them into 6 different PLXs. These PLNs will operate for 2 years, so we're going to enter into potentially multi-year contracts. And as I said before, more information on this item this issue is on item 11. A wide variety of partners, as you'll see, and the partnership rules would be with PLN hosts. The cost, as the chair alluded to, on this one is higher than was in the original plan, although in both situations, this component is by far the most expensive plan. It requires the most resources to do these networks. So I don't know if there are any general questions about this, but the detailed questions about who the hosts are and sort of their distribution, that information is contained within item 11.
Okay. Any questions on this right now? Sure, Michael.
Just a comment. I did ask, we were hosting one of the PLNs, EA PLNs, before I left, and I asked the facilitator, who was my associate superintendent, as you know, to give me some feedback from the group. And I must say it was all positive. I'll read what they said. The validations among the group at the district are on the right track, so that's a good thing. The technical knowledge regarding the dashboard and the LCAP changes were essential, so they enjoyed that. They appreciated the deeper discussion on specific problems such as ELs and mathematics. How do we address those issues? The important and professional conversations on areas of improvement, they're dealing with that. And the focus on data analysis built into each monthly district calendar. So it looks like these are, at least in our county, they are moving forward successfully.
Great. Thank you for that feedback. It's great to hear.
Thank you, Michael. Tim.
I completely agree, and I've heard nothing but positive feedback and support the direction. I did have one question, just in terms of, are there any metrics that we're looking at the networks in terms of, again, student outcomes, which our chair has talked about throughout, and which we all are looking at with all of this. So I mean, is there specific things that we're looking for from each of the networks? Because I mean, I think their creation in and of themselves are a very positive development. And for all the reasons that Michael said in terms of that level of collaboration and being able to work together in some of these common areas. But what are the metrics that we're looking at in terms of what we're hoping to achieve from the networks?
So we've actually had extensive conversation on this very question. With the early adopters, the purpose was not to sort of to draw a direct line to a particular student outcome. And it was only for 6 months. It was very preliminary. We didn't have all of the logistical pieces worked out. So the purpose of the early adopters was really to prepare ourselves and the field for these longer 2-year-long PLNs. Because each network's focus is different, we don't sort of at the start have particular metrics that will apply to every single network. But one of the things that we put in the LOI and we flagged is just this point. So we will be expecting all of the PLNs, and we'll be working with them to do so, and they'll be working with their coaches, to develop that through line from the work of the network to a particular educational outcome. And that may be, in some situations, how to write a more thoughtful LCAP. It may be more sort of traditional around how to support teachers better, or more sort of closer, but it will depend on the unique focus of the network. So there aren't going to be, we're trying to sort of model local control, but we're definitely very focused on that exact question, and feel that probably not in August, but at the October, more like the December meeting, we could provide some examples for you around sort of what that might look like.
Yeah, no, and I think that makes sense, because every network's going to be different in scope, different in character, different in focus. There's no way you would have the same metric for every network, but as long as kind of the end is in mind for each one, kind of tailored to what they're specifically charged with, I think makes sense. So thank you.
I would definitely agree with that, Tim, that I think we should be able to say, what did the network say they were going to work on? and then measure whether or not they did and whether or not they saw improvement. They can have different objectives, but we should be able to do that. I think that's important for purposes of accountability. Okay. Any other questions on this component? If not, and we'll talk about it in more detail on the next item, we can go to.
Okay. I'm going to just briefly run through sort of the staffing and other items that are identified in the plan. We have our esteemed assistant director and our fantastic 2 senior managers. We're interested in adding additional senior managers. That is covered in item 12. We also have some independent contractors. The customized training, this is the original component 4 that sort of morphed with sort of board support and direction to basically responding upon requests to substantive inquiries around LCFF. We will be logging those customized trainings, and we intend to update the board approximately twice a year on those trainings. And I'm going to turn over now to Suji Shin to talk about these next 2 items, the test kitchen and the statewide survey.
Thanks, Josh. Morning, Madam Chair, members. Suji Shin, Director of Research and Strategy. And I just want to take a moment today and just very briefly introduce 2 initiatives that we're working on that will be brought back to the board for deeper discussion and detail at later meetings. The first is around what we're calling the LCFF test kitchen. And this initiative arose after conversations that we've had with LEAs or county offices or charter colleagues in the field, resulting in this identification of a gap in supports available for the implementation of LCFF, and a need that we've identified for LEAs to have a space in which they could really examine specific challenges that they're facing at the local context around their implementation of LCFF. And this could be around, tools, resources, processes to really make that more possible. And that we would find this kind of local work in identifying innovative solutions with facilitation and research support. So to embark upon this kind of initial pilot work, we have partnered with WestEd and applied for and was granted a small grant from Hewlett to begin this kind of work to examine what this might look like in the field. Our first kind of focus is going to be around what we've heard. We've had some conversations with LEAs around very specific ties or challenges in examining budget to LCAPs and really highlighting the ways in which we can make that transparency more easy and strategically usable for LEAs. So that will be the first focus of this work, and we're hoping to continue on and expand this effort through additional funding and further work on that. Great. The second piece, or second update, very quickly, I wanted to bring to the board our work moving forward on the statewide survey. This was outlined in SB 828 around the requirement to administer a statewide survey in 2017-18, specifically focusing on how LEAs were using the dashboard to develop and implement LCAPs. And so right now we have been in conversation with potential research collaborators to develop both a framework for developing, administering, and collecting, so that it's not an isolated piece of work, but that we're moving forward with other folks who are having these kind of same conversations in the field. And so again, at a next meeting, I'll have greater detail and clarity around what that partnership might look like and the areas of focus for our work. Any questions?
Questions or comments? Thanks, Suji. Appreciate the update.
I just, again, want to acknowledge Suji's fantastic grant opportunity that she got us with $300,000. So that's our first outside funding, which is a big win and exciting opportunities for work that we're doing. Very briefly, we're going to continue to work with a couple of content consultants, independent contractors, and then there's the fiscal agent cost, which is included in this of 5%. This is the staffing and other item budget costs, and if there are any other questions I can answer, then I have a couple of final consideration slides on this item.
Okay. Any questions? Go ahead and move to the. Thank you.
So we touched on sort of each component. I guess just one opportunity. If there's anything else that the board feels like is missing from the plan update, such that when we do come back in August, we can make sure to add or address or respond to those pieces.
Tim?
As we discussed at the last meeting, I think I definitely support the removal of component 4, but the work of component 4 as envisioned, is that going to be embedded more just in the general work of the organization in terms of some of those being able to answer questions? And because the concept was good, being readily available, whether it was a call desk or some sort of thing, but that's just embedded in the work of staff, correct?
Correct. It's the customized training, so it's sort of one-off. They call us, we help them out with a phone call or whatever. So that will continue. We will log it. We will present that data to the board a couple times a year just to make sure you are aware of sort of what we're being asked to do. But it's not formally sort of a separate component in the PD plan anymore.
I like that because I think it is important to document that, to log it, and to be able to provide those customized trainings and services. Because some of the help that a district might need, it might not be a formal PLN or a formal workshop, but as an organization being accessible to the field to be able to provide those services is important. As long as it's captured in our work, then I'm fine with removal.
Michael, did you have anything?
I know you and I talked about this, Josh, earlier when we spoke. I guess I'm wondering, how are you going to quantify some of the results that you're looking for? What's your baseline? And we talked about a lot of, I guess, process, and have you given that some thought? I'm sure you have. I don't know if it's 1 year down the road, 2 years down the road, 3 years, but at some point, we're going to want to look at some data that says, okay, we've made this adjustments and these students are doing this over here. So have you given that thought for our conversation? And what does that look like in your mind?
So we've given it quite a bit of thought. I think there are some of the activities that we're engaged in are all of the activities we engage in are fairly removed from a student in a classroom. But yet there are sort of ultimate driver and motivation. With the shift to with the modules, I think that brings component 1 a little bit closer so that we're able to draw a more direct line. And I mentioned in component 3 around the networks, sort of we're going to network by network, going to try to make that connection. Component 2 as well, depending upon how it sort of lays out. I think the sort of metrics that we will be looking at around sort of the immediate impact of our work relates in part to the statewide survey that Suji mentioned, sort of how is the dashboard being used? How is the LCAP being used? What is the level of comfort in all of our workshops? We've asked, has this workshop helped sort of improve your comfort level? I forget the exact phrasing of the question, with respect to the dashboard and respect to the LCAP. So I think sort of there's a couple of levels. The most immediate impact would be sort of simply the ability, and this is my phrase, to do local control. So we have these tools, we have the dashboard, we have LCAP, we have this idea of continuous improvement, we have this idea of local decision-making and stakeholder engagement. Can we look at metrics that be they qualitative or more sort of data specific that really demonstrate that has improved? And so we've had extensive conversations. I don't have something specific like a metric that I can offer you right now because we've continued to sort of struggle, but we are definitely very focused on, at the end of this 2 to 3 year endeavor, how do we demonstrate that we've had a positive impact on the field? And we very much want to demonstrate that we have.
So Josh, I'm sure you and Ish were taking notes about what our comments were, so I don't know that we have to go through all of them, but that sort of answers your question about details that are missing, more information on component 1, what the modules will be, what the reach will be, how you'll measure effectiveness. And the same thing on component 2, I call it the so what question. Who's using the materials to what end, and are they effective kind of thing. I think that's the theme you're hearing, especially at the last part of this conversation, that we're all interested in accountability and being able to say, yes, this is what we said we were going to do, and we measured it, and here's where we succeeded, and here's where we need additional improvements. The last thing for me, in terms of the subsequent conversation, I'd like to see a table that shows what the changes were from the original plan to the proposed change. Because you did it in narrative form, but I'm like a picture person and would like to see it on an Excel spreadsheet about what the changes are in each component, so we know what we're doing going forward.
And with respect to that, are you referring to budget or program or both?
Budget primarily. I think you've done a good job of program in here.
So in anticipation that I might get asked this question,
Okay.
you put together this slide, and I'm happy to bring it back and discuss it in more detail, but this talks about the original plan budget for years 2 and 3 and the plan update for years 2 and 3 with the differences. And to your point about sort of the large scale shifts in funding. So happy to bring this back, and if there's any other tables, I'm happy to prepare those as well.
Well, to the extent that you go back and consider some of the things we've said, like, gee, maybe we do need to have more money in component 1 or whatever, then just have an updated table.
Yep. Okay.
Okay, any other questions or comments? Other things you want to say before I call for public comment?
Sure. Just two quick things. One, the handout that you have went to print, and since that printing, we had some discussions around what the motion would be. So I added a couple of slides, striking out what we're no longer doing and adding what I would offer up as a revised motion. But before we get to that, and of course for public comment, I just also want to acknowledge Sulan Morales, Leslie Diggins, and of course, Erica Badagan. The three of them have been fantastic, but Erica in particular, her ability to keep the CCEE ship running is truly remarkable with the attitude and calmness that she does. So just a quick appreciation for all of her work, for making our work appear like we know what we're doing. So that's really helpful.
Ditto. So any questions? This is the motion that Josh is proposing. I think it reflects certainly my level of concern about approving at this meeting, gives an option to move forward with the continued considerations for the plan, but not without formal approval until August. But we'll talk about the professional learning network separately, so we have the opportunity to move forward more quickly on that. So before we have a motion, Tom, did you have a
Just
question?
curious where the list of the learning professional networks is. Do we have that? I looked.
In the next item, you will be getting a handout that lists all of the hosts in those networks.
Okay.
Okay. So at this point, I'm going to call for public comment. Erica, do we have anybody signed up for public comment? Okay. Seeing none, I would entertain a motion on this item.
Well, I'll make the motion then that we delay until August formal action on the 17-18 update to the LCFF PD training implementation plan, that we permit staff to move forward with preliminary steps to ensure the 17-18 update may be implemented.
Okay, is there a second?
I'll second.
Second. Okay, any public comment on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. No opposition, it passes unanimously. Thank you, Josh, and to your entire team for all your work on this. Appreciate it. Okay, item 11. This is the delegation of authority for contracting for the professional learning networks.
So, hello again. You're getting the less thick handout right now. Again, Josh Daniels, Director of Training and Outreach. This is specific to the PLNs. The end result here would be to grant the executive director authority to have the fiscal agent enter into contracts on behalf of CCEE with all of the PLNs that we've identified, and perhaps, again, a few more if funding becomes available, consistent with the overall amount of money that is set aside. So this is a repeat slide, almost 70 LOIs, approved 52 with potentially a few more, 6 PLXs, and they'd operate for 17-18 and 18-19. So I'm going to jump into some data here. Host type. So of the 52 PLNs, over 2/3 are hosted by county offices of education. Almost 20% are hosted by statewide associations. 2 or close to 5% are hosted by charter management organizations. And then there are a few others that are hosted by other nonprofit organizations. And then we'll get into it in the next item, but the pilots, the CCEE pilots, are forming a PLN, which is really exciting for us. And so they're one of the 52. We thought it would be interesting to show the geographical distribution. We don't want all of these networks to be the same. We have a wide state, a variety of LEAs. We want the lessons learned and the experience of these networks to apply to the wide variety of LEAs that exist. So we have 11 of the 52 networks that sort of have statewide in scope. Another 11 are focused in Northern California. And as a Bay Area resident, I've been told by those folks who live more north than me that we are not Northern California. So there's Northern California, and then there's Bay Area. There's Central Valley, which I was very excited about to see that we have a good number from Central Valley. Southern California, which includes both LA and San Diego. And then Central Coast, which is sort of just below the Bay Area to just above LA on the coast, and then the Inland Empire. We didn't figure out a way yet, we're working on it, to sort of use a picture to represent all of these, but we could easily say of those 36 county-led PLNs, what would that look like if you placed it on a map? So while it's hard to show the whole state on a map, this is our best attempt at it. And as you can see, there's very wide distribution across the state. There really isn't a geographical area that has nothing. Obviously, we would love to have the whole state be blue. That's not a political statement, that is a color statement. But that this, we are very proud actually of this distribution. In terms of the estimated number of participating LEAs, so this is, an LEA might participate by sending one person to a network, might send multiple people to a network, but we thought that this data might be interesting, and this is just estimated. These things are still in flux, the exact LEAs, but roughly speaking, while most county offices are hosts, there are a couple of county offices that are participating in networks. And then close to 15% of participating LEAs are charters, and close to 85% are school districts. In terms of the participant roles, you can see there's a wide variety of participant roles. Over 30% of participants are estimated to be superintendents, and another 36 are other sort of district or county office staff. 12% site administrators, 10% charter, 3% board members, and there are some parents and families. Other include teachers, other sort of classified support staff at the site level. And so we found this data to be exciting because it reflected the fact that there is a wide variety of individuals, participants, and hosts involved in these 52 networks. And that's exactly what we wanted when we sort of designed the process to solicit and select these PLNs. So there is a motion on the next slide, but that this is the data. So before I move to motion, I'm happy to answer any questions. The list of hosts is on the end, final 5 or 6 slides. So if you have any particular questions, I'm happy to answer them, but I didn't want to take 5 minutes to read through all the names. It's quite lengthy, but it is there in case anyone is interested in reading through it.
Okay. Any questions or comments? Tim?
It's more of just a comment, is if teachers are included in the other DO, COE, that's okay. But I would really make sure that anyone that's in this PLN, knows that at the end of the day, that teacher engagement is critical to the success of the work. And if the PLN's around capacity building, which builds the capacity of teachers to carry out these things, but I mean, the improvement in the metric of student outcomes is only going to happen with the active engagement of teachers. I know a lot of work's been done around that already, but I would just make sure as these PLNs move forward, that's always front and center in the thinking.
Thank you. Michael?
Have we seen, we probably have the detailed budget for the PLNs? Do you have the, I saw you have 8 million figure down here, but is it online or the details?
It is not yet. We're still sort of in conversation with each of the hosts around what their final budget would be. I'm happy to bring that back. My understanding of past board direction was to sort of bring the overarching costs, but I'm more than happy to provide whatever level of detail the board would like on any of these.
I would. If it's not too much work for you, okay?
Would it be okay if we waited until we narrowed in the final numbers before? Because I don't want to mislead. Okay.
I just want to have a general idea of where the money's, how it's being spent, that's all.
But, so Josh, is there like a conceptual framework, though, that X amount is going to the, or are you negotiating them each individually?
Well, I wouldn't call it a negotiation. I think there were certain costs that we felt would be appropriate to be included in the amount of the contracted amounts. And we did our best to articulate that clearly in the announcement. Some of the submitted budgets were not clear on that point, or just in the process of submitting forgot. We want to make sure that every budget we can stand behind. And so we're having 52 conversations around what that will look like. I can tell you that the overall cost over 2 years is the 8.8 million, and so it's 4.4 each year. So that's the sort of the overall cap, and there is going to be wide variation because we gave a lot of flexibility in terms of how you would structure your network. So they're not, unlike the early adopters where we said we're going to provide 0.5 FTE and that's what we're going to fund, and even there was variation. Here we said we're going to, because of feedback from the field, we're going to remove that restriction and identify some duties that are required, but ask each host to identify the FTE that it takes to complete those duties and whether or not they're asking the CCEE to cover the whole cost or part of the cost. So there is some, we're still sort of making sure that when somebody says, we want to do a 0.3 FTE for the facilitator, we'll make sure that we're comfortable with that particular cost and that particular line item in the budget.
I had a similar, if I may, Madam Chair, similar questions that you both had and you answered well. The motion today, actually, then what does it cover, and as to the specific details of the budget on any of the 52 or all of the 52, just to understand the context, are we giving approval for staff to finalize those numbers? Are the numbers coming back to us for ratification of any kind? Just getting a sense of your process.
So staff's proposal, but obviously we'll take direction from the board, would be to approve the executive director to ask the fiscal agent to enter into at least 52 contracts, perhaps slightly more, again, if money, but such that the total cost of those contracts is not more than 8.8 million. The contracts, other than that, would not necessarily, the current proposal would not be to bring each contract back to board for discussion or ratification. I serve on a board, frankly, 52 contracts seems like a lot to approve. And the level of detail is quite extensive. We've had 52 conversations, and we're continuing to have conversations around, minutia around, well, really, what is your purpose? Really, does that connect to that purpose? Is that a cost that is associated with the PLN? But it would be basically an overall not to exceed amount that would be left to the executive director at his discretion with fiscal agent in partnership.
Are you comfortable with that? Okay. So that's the motion that will be in. I guess the other part I'm like a broken record today on accountability, but I want to make sure that the agreements that we're reaching under these contracts also includes the expected outcomes of the network, how they're going to be measured, and how we will know whether they did what they said they would do. Each network, yeah, relative to what they're saying they're working on. I just have a couple of questions about, on the counties, and I appreciate the map. Are any of the county networks regional in nature? Are they including, because the counties are organized by region. So I look, for example, on Mono and Inyo. I know they're part of Region 10. They typically work with Riverside and San Bernardino. whether, do you know that off the top of your head?
So I do. So the Yolo County network includes, I believe, Colusa, Sutter, at least, sorry, the early adopter included Colusa, Sutter, and Yuba. Do we know the details of that one? No? Okay. I believe that it continued in some form, whether included those all other three, I don't know for sure. To my knowledge, Mono and Inyo, or districts in those two counties, are not in any network, and Mono County and Inyo County currently are not. They are in part of an early adopter, but that one did not submit a letter of interest for continuing.
Okay. And then the ones where you have like Tulare County, I'm not to pick out counties, but you had also, I think, CTA, where it says 3X, there's actually 3 networks, or what does that mean?
Correct. So Tulare County, for example, they submitted multiple letters of interest, and they will actually be hosting 3 different networks. Same thing for Kern County, 2 School Boards Association, Charter School Development Group, Teacher Association, those all submitted, and in this particular situation were approved for more than just one.
So just in terms of the investment, as you've mentioned, it's $8 million and change. This is definitely where we are making our largest investment in professional development going forward. And I think I appreciate your comments, and especially yours, Michael, from on the field, knowing how well received these are. But just want to make sure, for the record, that's what we're saying, that we're putting our piggy bank on professional learning networks before we move forward. I think everybody's comfortable with it. I think it's a very inventive and, to the point earlier about California leading the way, it's the way we want to go, but just want to make sure that we understand that relative to our budget. So I'm happy to entertain a motion. Okay, I have a motion. Is there a second? And a second. Is there public comment on this item or on the motion? Okay, seeing none. You have the motion in front of you. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. No opposition. It passes unanimously.
Very much.
And then, consistent with the discussion at the beginning of the agenda, we're moving item 14 to this slot prior to 12 and 13. So I think Dr. Molina is going to lead us. Good morning.
Morning,
Good to see
Madam Chair,
you.
board members. Aida Molina, Director of CCEE. Thank you for being here this morning and this opportunity. And thank you, Erica, for setting this up for me.
Carl, I forwarded you that. I forwarded this to you again. Okay.
Thank you for your patience. Okay. So our goal today, really, Suji and I will be presenting to the board today regarding our summit presentation. We will be doing 4 items that we will be discussing. We are going to talk about, and this one is not working. Is it?
I think they should be seeing the full slide there. Let's see here. Hang on, just one moment, please. There, okay. Technical support here. Hang on a second here. Yeah, but this is your PowerPoint here, so hang on a second here. Give me a second.
I apologize.
Just hang on.
I appreciate listening to the background jackhammer noise. It makes me feel like I'm at the dentist.
About this.
Nothing I can do about that one, so.
Okay. Now we should be back.
Okay, let's try this again. All right, our goal today, Suji and I will be presenting a pilot update. We're going to primarily focus on the summit that we had in May. I want to take this opportunity and thank Board Member Sembranti for attending our summit, And I want to personally thank Board Member Watkins for sending a representative to the summit. It was great to have those voices and to be able to get some feedback. We'll also spend some time talking about our framework, our pilot framework, specifically on what we presented to our partnership regarding the guiding principles. We'll go into the phases. We actually spent some time really digging deep on our phases, and we'll spend some time with that today. And most importantly, we will bring a voice from the field. We have Greenfield, Dr. Berman, and Dr. Gass that will be presenting for us today. Let's see. So now, okay. Our purpose for our summit really truly was to collaborate with our team to go deeper into understanding what is the purpose of the pilot partnership. We continue to bring that forward so that we're very clear about the work, which is to inform and provide that feedback back to you as our board members about the lessons being learned and actually building capacity for our pilots. We also talked about the importance about the phases of implementation. We took some time and it went in depth about what each of those 3 phases were, and more importantly, how we will continue to build capacity to support continuous improvement throughout this process. We began by defining our work with our partners to really talk about these 3 big ideas. How do we define what continuous improvement means to us as a pilot partnership? How do we continue to build capacity within our partnership? And what does local control and what does all that mean for us? And we really did spend some time collaboratively coming up and defining those terms. We'll use those definitions to continue to bring to the forefront as we work together as a partnership. We're still refining those definitions, but it was great conversation to hear the teams, to be able to say to each other, what do these definitions really mean and how we use these definitions as we continue to do our work. At the end of our summit, what was most impressive was this idea of this genuine commitment about how we use continuous improvement using the LCFF and LCAP process to close the equity gap. We spent some time, the importance of understanding that it's key for us to be able to use our process to identify the gaps. That occurs through our implementation phases. We talked about the importance of the summit of highlighting our work, of what's working, and bringing those best strategies forward to our teams, and how we will continue to monitor ourselves and how about the implementation process of continuous improvement. More importantly, the team came to agreement that it was critical that we continue to create the opportunities to come together on a more frequent basis to be able to understand our areas of support. Oh, I see some confusion. I missed a slide, didn't I? I apologize for that. Our areas of focus, well, Eric, I'm confused. Is that the one I'm on?
This is what they're watching.
Okay, good.
The next
I apologize. So we left with our areas of focus of really understanding that they want more support on helping the teams better understand how we continue to measure our success of continuous improvement, which is exactly what I heard you guys mention to us today. We talked about that they want to learn more about equity. How do we leverage our LCFF dollars to help all our students achieve the highest levels? And they also want more support on how we're going to manage governance, how we're going to be able to provide more support and how to work with our boards, particularly in this era of engagement, bringing folks to the forefront, being transparent of how we're spending money, how we engage the community to be able to do this. And so these are 3 key areas that we are going to continue to bring to our pilots during our summits. We had an opportunity let's see. Now, I apologize. I am really struggling with this. Is this the one they're seeing? Okay, so I just talked about yes, I just talked about that. And I just talked about our areas of focus. At this time, I want to turn it over to Suji. She's going to be talking about guiding principles. I apologize. I am really learning how to use this without my notes, and I don't think I did a very good job this.
Morning, Madam Chair and members again. So, as Aida outlined, we just finished our second real deep dive conversation with our pilot partners in really understanding sort of where they were coming from and having joint conversations with them together as a cohort of pilots in and of themselves. And so in this work, I wanted to bring forth to you today some of the conversation that we're having and the way that we're beginning to really shape the work that we're doing, both in our partnerships with individual pilots, but as well as the larger cohort and the network of pilots as we think about what is the shape and the structure of this work over the next several years. So with that, I think you have before you our guiding principles. And one of the first things we really dove into with our pilots over the past, or over that 2-day session, was really getting into what are the principles that really guide the work that we do and the process by which we come together with shaping solutions, ideas, processes, and protocols. And with that, I think one of the key sort of sets of guiding principles are what we're pulling from the Carnegie Institute and their improvement studies work. We felt that this really tied in well with the kind of focus on continuous improvement and capacity building that we're working with them each on, and tied in that ability to really focus on kind of learning from what was happening in the individual context and how we shared it out with a larger cohort as a group as well as a larger field. We're also tying it into work in sort of user-centered design approach so that we can ensure that all of the work as we're developing what we're doing individually and again as a cohort, we're focused very specifically on how we address the local challenges that each of our LEAs are facing and think about what are the ways in which we can spread the good work that we're developing, that we're identifying and highlighting across each of our LEAs. So these principles are really what we're keeping in mind as we support and develop our partnerships individually and the frame for how we will be approaching our problems, not providing any kind of protocols for what we're doing. If that makes sense. Great. So with that, I think I want to talk a little bit about some of the graphic kind of understanding of how our pilot partners work. And this graphic outlines the makeup of our partnership. I think Josh in his earlier presentation sort of gave you a slice of what the PLXs look like. And as a smaller piece of that, the LEA leadership team, I'm going to sort of go all the way through. So what you have here for is sort of a graphic representation of what each of our individual pilot partnerships look like. So in there you have the LEA leadership teams, which can include the cabinet, central office members, site leadership, teachers, parents, students, community members, whoever it is that the superintendent and the LEA specifically outline as being germane to the kind of conversation and the problem of practice that we are addressing with them, that local context. And we see there in the superintendent at the center in blue, and flanked by both the county office as well as the CCEE lead. So again, as within each of our individual pilot partnerships, while we're grappling with very specific local problems, the kind of makeup of the team remains the same. And there you see that we are focusing on collaboratively examining data, identifying that area of focus, and then implementing cycles of continuous improvement around that area of focus together. So then you move from that individual pilot partnership that we just focused on. There we are in a smaller graphic form. And then we have sort of the larger network of pilots. So the way that we're framing and the way that we've had these conversations and are represented in our pilot summits, for example, are that all of our pilots are represented, and you have there, again, our meetings with the superintendent of each of our pilot partnerships, as well as their county office, usually the assistant or county office superintendent, again, and then with the CCEE partner to really join in a collaborative conversation about what is happening at the individual partnership level and contributing that larger conversation about how this network runs. And then as we move even further out, there will be an opportunity for, as Josh sort of very briefly outlined, for the pilot PLN to sit within that larger framework of the PLXs as a whole that are going to be facilitated by the CCEE. And so that's just sort of the larger frame of how that kind of magnifies out within the larger system. We also at the at the summit, started this conversation about what the phases of implementation look like. So as we go from kind of framing, the guiding principles that guide our work, then what does this look like on the ground as we really start to get in deeper around examining problems of practice at that local level, thinking about, implementing needs assessments, looking at root cause analysis as after we examine data, capture the local story, and start thinking about what does that work plan for us look like over the next several years. So you have in front of you kind of 3 sets of phases as we're conceptualizing this now, based on our initial conversations or work to date. An initial phase, which is really focused on capturing that local story. So examining the data, really understanding who and what the local context is. These constitute our visits out into our partner districts to really understand who they are and what those needs look like. Identifying the stakeholder groups, the leadership team to really start formulating what will this partnership look like. The next phase then after that is then getting into an analysis of, the sort of root causes, identifying kind of the exact needs, assessing sort of like what local goals are, identifying sort of a very clear problem of practice that we will be tackling together, and how that sits sort of within their larger context of accountability, within their LCAP, within all the other sort of initiatives and work going on in the district, and identifying then metrics of success, so the processes, timelines, roles, as we think about how we're going to be tackling this, and ultimately think to the board's earlier point, how this ties into change in instructional practice and outcomes for students over time. And so all of our conversations are really geared towards thinking about what are we doing at that district level that will impact what is happening at the school and classroom levels, so that we are seeing outcomes for students at the end of this work. Then the kind of output for this phase will be the development and of an implementation plan that we are both in agreement of, that really take all those steps, put them in order, tie in these metrics of success, and clearly outline a plan, again, where we take a look at the problem cause, what we're going to be doing, and what sort of outcomes will look like over time. The bulk of the work is in phase 3, and this part is sort of least defined as we're still getting to this and fleshing this piece out. But over several years, once this kind of problem of practice is identified, this collaboration is solidified, that we really do then start to implement or establish cycles of continuous improvement, where we really focus and facilitate innovation, implementation, evaluation, and sort of adjustment of the work to address, that particular problem of practice for that LEA over time, with some real support built in to especially on the evaluation, analysis, and readjustment piece. We are going to be establishing ongoing check-ins and really working with LEAs to ensure that there is that continued engagement with stakeholders, so that the conversations continue beyond that kind of initial capture of the story, but they're part of this work going on over the course of the period. So any questions or comments before I introduce you all to our voices?
Questions or comments? I think we're ready to hear from.
Right, fantastic. So I'd like to introduce, what's the next slide? What's happening? Aida, you cursed us. So with that, I just wanted to introduce Dr. Deneen Gus from the Monterey County Office of Education, as well as Dr. Kimberly Berman from Greenfield Union School District, who are one of our pilots that we are thrilled to be working with. And we've asked them to come up and share some of the work that they're doing, and from their perspective, talk a little bit about what this partnership has looked like and what they are hoping to do over the course of the next couple of years.
Well, good afternoon. It's a pleasure to be with you today. I'm Dr. Deneen Gus, Deputy Superintendent for the Monterey County Office of Education, and I'm here today with Dr. Kimberly Berman, Superintendent from the Greenfield Union Elementary School District. And we thought we'd start our presentation today by giving you a little bit of the demographics of Monterey County, and then we'll move specifically into the demographics of the Greenfield School District. So let me just start by saying that the Monterey County is a very diverse county where we have some districts who are basic aid districts, very rich with resources, and we have other districts who have greater challenges serving students with high numbers of students coming from a background of poverty. We just passed out a copy of the Monterey County Annual Report, and we thought it might be helpful to refer you to a few pages in the annual report that gives you the specific numbers or the big picture of our demographics of the county. So if I can ask you to turn to page 4 of our annual report. If you look at the left-hand side of the page, you'll see the enrollment by district in Monterey County, and you'll see that we serve 76,768 students. In Greenfield, we have 3,510 of those students. Our student enrollment by ethnicity, you'll see that we have 78% of our students who are Hispanic or Latino. And if you flip over to the next page, page 5, you'll see that when you look at our subgroups, we have 41% of our students who are English learners, which is 19% higher than the percent of students statewide who are English learners. We serve 69% of our students who are socioeconomically disadvantaged as compared to the state at 59%, which is a 10% increase. And our migrant students, we have 5% in Monterey County. We actually have one of the largest migrant populations in our region. If you take a look at our graduation rates, what you'll see is we're doing fairly well. 85% of our students are graduating, and compared to the state at 82%. So we're doing well with our graduation rates and with our dropout rates as well. If you look at the chart right below, you'll see that in Monterey County, we have a 7% dropout rate as compared to the state at 11%. And now the news that's not so good. If you flip over to page 6, what you'll see is in the areas of English language arts and mathematics, we have a great deal of room to grow. And so this has been our focus in the county. And this leads me to Greenfield, and so I'd like to turn it right over to Dr. Kimberly Berman, who can give you the specific demographics for her district.
Good morning, Board. In Greenfield, as Deneen shared, there are 3,510 students in our district. 92% of those students meet the unduplicated pupil population. And 67% of our students are English learners, with 8% being migrant learners. We also have an indigenous population of students from Triqui and Mixteco. And so historically in Greenfield, we have had low achievement. And as I've worked with the county office since 2014 in Monterey County, I've had conversations with Dr. Gus and her team about how they can best support us. When Dr. Gus called me and let me know that there was an opportunity to potentially pilot with CCEE, a new organization to help our school district, I was excited for that. And I remember meeting Suji Shen at that meeting. And from the very start, as you may know, she asked a lot of questions. And she continues to ask a lot of questions. And what we found is that we still have more questions to ask, but we do believe that we're getting to the heart of a lot of the things that we need to start to answer to make a bigger difference for our students in Greenfield. Deneen will share with you the past history of the county and the support they've provided before.
Thank you. So when I made that famous call to Dr. Berman, I said, Kimberly, I have this great opportunity for you. There's a pilot going on with CCEE. They want to pilot, they want to partner with county offices, and they want to partner with districts. And we really want to do it differently. This is not going to be a repeat of the old date process. This is going to be a whole new thing that we get to design together as a three-way partnership that's going to be organic, and it's going to be flexible, and it's going to be really focused on the local context. And she said, oh, date. Yeah, we've gone through date before. I'm not too sure. But I said, no, it's not going to be date. And so I wanted to take just a few minutes to talk about that prior date process and at times how it made people feel. The old process was really, it felt to the end users as a process that was very prescriptive. It felt like a one-size-fits-all approach. It felt very externally driven, very top-down. And it also had the potential to leave the impression with the district that they can't solve their own challenges, that it takes an outside entity to come in and help you solve those challenges. And so what I said to Kimberly was, we're not going to do that. We're going to create a pilot that when we walk away from this, we're going to have great results that can be replicable in other communities. And it's going to be a pilot that we can embrace teaching and learning together, and we can come up with what we need to do that's really going to fit your needs. And what I assured her, and hopefully she would agree, our work looks more like this. We really see ourselves as helping the district focus on the focus. And that focus is the development and the implementation of the LCAP. That's the bottom line. That's our current work. And in order to do that, we really want to be thought partners with the district. We want to focus on the dashboard and how you use those dashboard results and the local indicators to ensure that the LCAP goals and actions are truly focused on supporting the work that needs to be done. We see ourselves, as I mentioned, as those thought partners who seek to understand the local challenges. We want our districts to know we are in this together. We're a team. It's not the county office or the CCEE coming in to tell you how to do your work. We are here to share our talents, our resources, and work side by side with the district to make those positive changes. We see it as, again, I'll say, organically growing and developing and being very flexible as the need changes over the years. Because I mentioned earlier, we're in this for the long haul. We're not coming in to make changes and then walk away. We're going to be a long-term partner together in this work. And we also see this as an opportunity to think outside of the box and bring our collective talents and resources together. And that's the resources not only of the county office, but also of the CCEE. And so now I'd like to take a moment and turn it back over to Dr. Berman, who will walk you through her PowerPoint that kind of talks you through the LCAP process in her district. Kimberly?
Okay. Put that up, Erica. Okay.
Oh, there you go.
So this is the work that we've done over the past year. We've done that in collaboration with CCEE and the county office. And we have just submitted our LCAP, and we are confident that the county office will be approving that and knowing that we're going to implement it with fidelity. And so I want to share a few of the components in here. We do use the system of Plan, Do, Study, Act. We find it important to be cyclical in this process and to continually come around to the different items and think thoroughly with our team and have a lot of input from all of our stakeholders. We did the book study of coherence this year, and it was really important when CCEE has been out for different meetings that we keep coming back to those ideas and using the expertise of CCEE to help our team flesh out their ideas and think more thoroughly about that. The CCEE team has helped us with many events. They've been involved in day-to-day activities, and they've been involved in greater events than that as well. They started when they first came out with stakeholder meetings for input. They met with parent groups, they met with teachers, they met with students, and it was a great opportunity for them to really understand the community of Greenfield. And as I like to remind them, it is their favorite place to visit in the Salinas Valley. In addition to that, they have also facilitated a board workshop that's been very important to our governance team and really moving forward the ideas holistically for our school district. They've been involved in community events that we've had this year, one which was the kindness sprinkling, where we stood side by side with our students and our staff on the sidewalks in Greenfield and sprinkled kindness by holding signs, and those were on Twitter, and so we appreciate their support in showing our community too, that they're there to understand our community, our students, and make a difference in that way. Recently, they were part of our Employee Appreciation Barbecue, where we recognized all of our classified and certificated staff members and enjoyed some delicious food as well. You're invited next year.
And the soup cook-off as well.
Oh, yeah, they were part of the Super Soup Cook-Off. We had soups with all of our staff, and they were part of the judging for that. So they've really become part of our staff, MCOE and CCEE, and so that's been important for our staff to see that they are truly working alongside us. In addition to that, we spent a lot of time walking through our classrooms together, debriefing with our principals afterwards, and having those critical conversations. Focusing direction was where we really needed to start this year, and that's what we did with our board during our retreat. We've used all of our stakeholder groups, as I've mentioned. Here you can see our LCAP group, along with our ELAC, our teachers, all of the input from our students. We've had parent cafes throughout the year to take our LCAP to the next level. We also did a parent survey. We were pleased to announce that the scores that we had from our parents were the highest that they've been historically, and so we have 95% of our parents feeling that they're engaged in their child's school. In addition to that, we then took the 8 state priorities. We also took the priorities of our board. We took the priorities that were listed in our LCAP before, and we did a lot of deep work to get to the next level. Of course, we used our dashboard, and as you can see, we have a long way to go, but we do feel that with the partnership of CCEE and MCOE, that we have a pathway to get there. It was important for us to focus on what we want to see, which is the Greenfield graduate, and figuring out what the profile of the Greenfield graduate was with our stakeholders. The following 6 items came up again and again from those stakeholder groups. A Greenfield graduate is someone who needs to be able to communicate, to lead, to be a critical thinker, to be a global citizen, to innovate, and to collaborate. And so focusing on that drove a lot of what our LCAP team was focused on as we met with them. We also had stakeholder input sheets at all of our schools and at all of our meetings so that we could continually come back to this. And on the other side here, you can see the green sheet, as we call it, which really boils down what our goals are and where we are going. When we met with Dr. Cohn, he shared lots of stories about Long Beach. And we really appreciate his insight as a superintendent. And he shared that with my board when they were figuring out how to change direction in their district. They decided they needed a mantra. And I think his mantra was high standards, dress, and behavior. And so they focused on those 3 things. We took our 3 items that we felt were most important to our district, which were culture, achievement, and partnerships. And we used the acronym CAP so that we bring to mind the idea of the graduation CAP and where we want our students to be in their next steps. From there, we put together our goals, our action steps, and our progress so that we could close that gap. And for next year on that green sheet, we have all of that outlined for each of those goals so that we can continually monitor and come back to and provide progress updates to our Board of Trustees. And so these are the items that our stakeholders determined were most important for us to move forward. Culture, as you can see, maintaining the equitable environment for our students and focusing on college and career events. We've had college and career fairs at our schools this year, and we have more planned for the future. We have a parent university that happens on Saturdays, and we have visited many of our local universities. I was with a group not long ago to UC Santa Cruz, and so an excellent opportunity for our families to really see what those next steps actually look like. In addition to that, we've implemented PBIS and restorative justice practices. In this first year of implementation, we have lowered suspensions and expulsions by 43%. And so we have buy-in from our teachers and from our administration, and we know it's making a difference. We have worked on creating collaborative environments for our staff and retaining our teachers. Located in the Salinas Valley, we're 30 minutes from a mall and we're 30 minutes from a movie theater. And so we really have to think about ways that we can entice our staff to be there. And our professional development has been robust. And we have a lot of new teachers coming in without their credentials, but getting the support that they need to be successful. And it's important to us that we retain those teachers into the future. We've also worked really hard to provide clean and safe and well-maintained schools. We broke ground earlier this last fall on a state-of-the-art media and library center. And on June 1st, just a few days ago, we broke ground on a new elementary school. And so we are issuing the bonds that our community has generously put forward for us, and we have a lot of plans to create the environments that our students need to be successful. We are focused on achievement, as we should be, and we're providing more of the early childhood experiences that we know will help our students as they take those first steps. With the county office's support, we've added a preschool to one of our campuses that did not have one previously. And so now we do have 4 preschool, or more than that, but we have at all 4 of our sites preschool programs for our students so that parents have access to the neighborhood schools. In addition to that, we're looking at deeper learning. We're looking at putting in that rigor and focusing on those 6 skills that we know that the Greenfield graduate must have. We have prioritized results-driven interventions and enrichment opportunities. We've implemented different systems such as iReady and a full MTSS approach so that we can really look at what our students need and how we best can provide for them. In addition to that, we have ongoing professional development that we do with both our classified and our certificated staff, and plans outlined for that well into next year. Partnerships is our final area, and this has been very important for providing the parents and our community with the resources they need to be part of their children's education so that we could get that 95% rating. We also have a turnaround arts grant at one of our schools. Chad Smith from the Red Hot Chili Peppers was just visiting us earlier this week. And in addition to that, we have partnerships with our local universities, and we have partnerships with agencies in our community that enhance the learning for our students. We are providing multiple ways for parents and community to support our schools and our students. And these are just some of the partnership groups that we work with, CCEE and Monterey County being those really primary ones for our district. We are focused on building capacity among our staff and our administrators because, as you may know, we are working on a unification with the South Monterey County Joint Union High School District. We have a 912 high school in our community, and we have satisfied 6 of the 9 criteria with our county committee, and we are continuing to work to provide the educational experience that our community is asking for. So thank you for the opportunity to share all of the great things happening in Greenfield, but more importantly, thank you for the opportunity to work with CCEE. This has been an amazing partnership. I feel that I can reach out to Dr. Cohn, Dr. Molina, and Ms. Shen for any of my questions, and they usually have more questions, but it does take us to a higher place. And so Dr. Gus will just close with a few words.
Well, in closing, we would also, just one more time, like to thank CCEE for their great work, their great support, and also thank the district for being willing and open to partner with this outside agency that she knew nothing about initially, and the County Office of Education. We just strongly feel that working together as a team, we can do so much more, especially when we're bringing our talents and our resources together to move that needle forward around teaching and learning. And so we're very thankful for the partnership. We feel right now that we're right at the end of that phase 1 part of the implementation, and we're getting ready to move into phase 2. So we're excited about the work, and we hope to come back at some point in the future and give you an update as to how the work's going. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Any while you're still here, any questions or comments to? I just want to say how much I appreciate the presentation. We really like to hear from the field. And as somebody who was on the state board, when we did something worse than DATE, when the state went in and took over Greenfield and put in an academic trustee, that was the most top-down thing you could even imagine. To see how far we've come and to see the fruits of LCFF and the wonderful talent that knows what's happening in the community working in this regard, it's just incredibly gratifying. So thank you so much for your work.
Yeah, I love the level of community engagement. And I think, I mean, it just comes across and it permeates the entire organization and helps students in so many ways. And the other thing I really love is the best practices, those green sheets, because so many of these LCAPs or are so long. I mean, these 100-page, 200-page documents that are, really hard to digest, but having it on a sheet, having it concise with the community, and I'm sure there's obviously a larger document that is part of, but having something concise, you can say, here's what we're about. This is the focus on the focus. I love that phrase, and just it's great to get this presentation, and thank you for staff for all the hard work that you do with the local level. So,
thank you very much.
Thank you for the presentation. Any comments from the board? This will conclude our report. If there are any questions, if not, we will conclude. Thank you.
And there's no motion on this.
There is no motion. We will continue to bring pilot updates at every meeting.
Right, perfect. Thank you so much. Really, really uplifting. Now we're going to return, I think, to the order, and we'll be on item 12, which is the authorize the hiring of new positions.
Good morning. This will be a quick item. Madam Chair, Josh Daniels, Director of Training and Outreach. This is, previously the board had created the position of Senior Manager for Training and authorized staff to move forward with hiring 2 people. As we fully implement or plan to implement the PLNs and the PLXs, we're sort of per that initial idea, which was in the original plan, we are sort of consistent with that, expanding our need to add more staff to support that work. So we're asking for permission to hire up to 3 new senior managers. It does, the recommendation in the item would permit us, if we couldn't find the right people or it didn't make sense, to go with consultants instead. So that is a possibility. But the up to 3 senior managers would sort of split into 2 categories. Up to 2 of those 3 would serve as PLX coaches, and the third of the 3 would serve as the facilitator for the pilot PLN. So this is a little bit of background. Currently, we have consultants serving for these 6 months as PLX coaches, 0.5 each. We think that we'll need 3.0 FTE total for the PLX coaches for next year. 1.0 of that is already covered, and we're looking at how we can find those other 2. And so the potential would be to hire up to 2 additional staff people for that. And then for the PLN facilitator, as was presented in the previous item, they're coming together to form a PLN, and they need a facilitator for that. And so succinctly, it's up to 3 positions with direction, permission for the executive director to sort of make the best determination depending upon candidate pools and cost and other factors.
Questions or comments on the proposal?
Will they be working directly with districts?
So no, the coaches will serve as the facilitator for that second tier of networks. So they will be working with the facilitators from county office run networks, from association-run networks and things like that. So this is to sort of provide that additional level of support that in the, at least early adopters, was quite well regarded in terms of the ability to not just be siloed within your network, but to connect to others and to share expertise and to build their capacity around being those facilitators.
How many pilots do you have now? 13, was it? How many pilots?
No,
So
10.
10 pilots.
I'm sorry, excuse me, sorry, Vice Chair. The third of the three, yes, that person will be the senior manager who is serving as the facilitator of the pilot PLN will be working with the pilots in conjunction with the directors.
Okay, that would be what I would recommend, more boots on the ground working with the districts. I don't see how 2 individuals can handle that as the pilots grow. So, yeah, okay, that's my comment.
So I don't know if you want to add anything, Dr. Marin.
No, just that we will, this is, currently, the way we will shape the work of the facilitator will truly be working with 3 directors in regards to how to shape what the facilitator will be doing. But we will be working directly with the 10 districts. We have, as we showed in the previous slide, the superintendent, the CCEE lead, and the county superintendent. So.
My concern again, as you allocate resources, are you going to grow the pilots? If you grow the pilots, if you expand the pilot pool, in other words, it doesn't appear that you'll have enough people to work in those districts. So in other words, do you reallocate resources to put them in schools to work with principals and superintendents as opposed to facilitators? That's my question, I guess.
We are not at that point yet, because currently it really is about shaping the PLNs with those 3 top levels so that we can dig deeper. Remember, we're building the capacity of each of the districts in order that they build the capacity for their principals and school teams. Unless I'm not understanding the question.
What can I maybe, because I think the intention is to keep at the level of 10 pilots, right? You're not planning to expand.
At this point, no.
Okay.
We have 10. We do have 2 potential coming forward, but this is not the pilot is not part of the expansion plan. This is specifically to deal with the 10 current pilots that will inform the end of 2021.
And the 10 pilots, the team that works with the pilots, in addition to AIDA and Suji, Socorro, as I believe, are there other folks on the CCE staff that are working directly with the pilots?
Not specifically.
But you feel like...
That doesn't mean that we can't access the support.
Yeah, but it seems like, I think, if I'm understanding Michael's question, he's concerned that you don't have enough folks working directly with the pilots, but it sounds like you feel you do.
At this point, until we get into the actual work, if we find that we are going to break into smaller groups, which is a very strong possibility. In other words, if 5 out of the 10 pilots have a specific focus that the other 5 don't, then that's when I think we may be coming forward and say we may need more support. But we don't know that yet.
Tim.
So I support this. It's part of a larger conversation. I know, Carl, we've talked a little bit about this. As the successes happen around the state, like we just heard about a great success today in Greenfield and Monterey County, some form of a communications, it has to be part of the staffing model, because pockets of excellence can lead to other pockets of excellence, can lead to greater excellence if the stories are told. And you've got, these different networks that we're talking about, 52 networks and all these different things. And yes, there's level of coordination, but if you have a communications person who's able to disseminate that, the very first meetings of this board, we talked about disseminating best practices. Now that can happen through the content library to a certain extent, that can happen through the network to a certain extent, but we have to also be thinking about a wider audience beyond those that are just directly participating. I look at it in 2 different buckets. There are those that are directly participating with CCEE, where we, they're part of the pilots, they're part of the networks. So that, is obviously going to be our first responsibility, but we have to be thinking about the 6.3 million students and what are we doing beyond those districts, schools, county offices that are directly within our orbit. And I think having that communications person as part of our long-term, I don't even want to say long-term. I mean, I'm looking at the next, 12 months or 24 months perhaps, but we have to be thinking about that, whether it's the audiences. And one of the things, Carl, that really struck me in your opening comments and during your executive director's report is if other states are looking to California as a national leader and they're looking to CCEE as a national leader, we have a responsibility and an obligation, I think, to really help with that, make the communication network more robust, whether it's our online presence, our social media presence, our direct engagement with editorial boards and others, as part of the narrative about the work that we're doing. And again, most importantly, to help highlight the successes so that way other districts can learn and grow. So I just put that out there. I know it's not directly related to the decision before us today, but I think sooner rather than later, that has to come back to us. We need to look at the resources. And it's not just a nice to have. I think more and more is becoming a need to have. And what struck me, and again, I know we're a newer organization, but when we had the superintendent saying, well, what's CCEE? That's still, we're going on over 2 years of existence now. And that's something that we can't have superintendents wondering what CCEE is. I mean, it's something, again, the work is more important than the PR, but part of doing the work successfully is that communication. So I can't say it enough. I really think we need to be looking at that sooner rather than later.
I think we can spend some time on this and come back with a proposal probably by August.
Okay, so everybody's clear on what we're being asked. The only thing I would like to add is I'm happy to support this, but I do want you to work carefully or closely with Marin and talk about sort of the fiscal implications of hiring versus contracting, because the costs, as you know, are different. And if we do in fact have time delimited funding, which is 2 years, that also needs to be a consideration around whether or not you're hiring people versus doing contracting. Okay, is there a motion on this item?
I'll make a motion that we approve the item as presented.
I'll second.
Okay, any public comment on the motion? Hearing none, all those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. There's no opposition, that passes unanimously.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. And we're on to item 13. Teresa, sorry we buried you at the end of the agenda.
So, good morning, almost. I guess it's almost over. Madam Chair, members of the CCEE Board, Dr. Cohn. My name is Teresa Hayden. I serve as the Chief Business Official for the Riverside County Superintendent of Schools. And just want to say that as we transition with Marin, we are working closely together. We know that they will do a spectacular job in this endeavor. So this morning I bring to you a projected budget for 17-18. Barring some of the conversations that have gone on here today and some revisions that are probably yet to come, at the time of posting, this was the budget that we have. And so Marin will take it from here and provide any adjustments that the board sees fit for them to make. We all know that a budget is not static. It is fluid and it continues to evolve. So this morning, just want to bring to your attention the budget that has been proposed. We have a program summary. It consists of about 5 pages, a program summary, then the operations budget, the pilot program, professional development, and then we have provided an apportionment recap at the back that kind of just shows a little bit of the history of where you've been. So in looking at the program summary, it's just kind of a roll-up of all of the components of the CCEE operation. And it really is showing that overall there are total expenditures of about $13.4 million and a remaining balance at the end of this budget of about 13.2 projected for 17-18. As we go into the operations budget, you'll see that there is a projected expenditure of about $1.5 million. And this operation is just everything other than the pilot and the professional development. On the next page, the pilot program is anticipated to pick up in earnest in 17-18. And so there is about $3.6 million in anticipated expenditures by the end of the year. There's also positions that are vacant that we anticipate being filled. The professional development program is a little bit different in its the way it is laid out, because per Josh's request, we have broken this out into components. So you'll see all the components broken out here. And the positions that have just been approved are in this budget as well. So projected of about $8.3 million in expenditures for the professional development program. And then for your edification, we have provided, again, this apportionment recap that just kind of shows where we have been and where we are at the current time. So this is put in front of you for adoption. Again, it will be changed as Marin comes in, as the board makes different decisions. And so I'm seeking your approval.
Okay. Any questions or comments? So as I understand it, we need a baseline from which Marin can operate, right, in this transition. So we need to adopt a budget that will be on the ground, at least for them, yes, beginning July 1st. But in August, we would expect to see revisions come forward, especially relative to professional development.
Yes.
Okay. All right. So before we have a motion, I again want to thank you for your professionalism. This is a fantastic summary. It's very well laid out, gives us all the information that we need. So Tarina, you have a high standard to fill.
Can I just say it's been our pleasure to work with the board and the staff of CCEE.
Thank you very much. So do I have a motion for adoption?
I'll make a motion to adopt the budget as presented.
Is there a second? Okay, any public comment on the budget? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. No opposition, that passes unanimously. That brings us, I believe, to item 15, general public comment. Do we have anybody signed up for that? No. Okay, before I adjourn, I just want to make an announcement that next meeting is Thursday, August 3rd. It's a change of location. It's at the Sacramento County Office of Education, just for everybody to note. At that meeting, a couple things I want to just call your attention to. We will have an item to change the October date, so for people to be planning for that, from Thursday, October 5th to Wednesday, October 4th. That would be back here in the Department of Ed. And just for your conversation as well, Tim, Carl and I have been talking a lot about the need to come back with some strategic planning conversation. Because as we all remember, when we were trying to figure out what we were going to be when we grow up, when we first started, we're kind of well into adolescence now, and we need to kind of recalibrate and make sure we're moving in the right direction. So that'll be part of our conversation in August as well. So thank you all for coming.
Madam Chair, I have one thing of note to share. So I'm currently getting my master's in education, and one of the things that is interesting going through the coursework is reading materials where they give a lot of credit to Michael Fullen, which obviously provides a lot of the philosophical underpinnings behind us, but two people specifically in multiple books and resources that I've read that they've highlighted are Dr. Cohn and Sandy Thorstensen for her leadership as exemplars. So that made me feel good about our organization, that externally, just as part of a master's program, they're highlighting the work that you've done in Long Beach and San Diego, and then here, and then obviously talking about Sandy and her work in Whittier as really a model, and in terms of the model about the PL, the professional learning communities that she established. So that made me feel good about the direction when they're highlighting our leaders in such a way. So I just thought I'd share that.
Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
Okay, nothing else. The meeting is adjourned.